Okay, we are back, and this is the final result of my texture painting for this character here. I did a little bit of cleanup off camera, but nothing that I didn't already show you how to do. All I did here was I just knocked back the effect of the fur a little bit by coming in with the base color here and doing a pass really lightly over the fur with my texture brush. Just to give it a little bit more subtle of an effect and blend in some of the blotchier areas. And the other thing that I did was I just came in with my solid brush and really lightly over the cheeks and like this area and the fingertips, painted in with like a pink color. If we go to the texture paint, it's this sort of dusty, sort of desaturated pink here. I just came in with a really light strength and a really light brush, just to give this character a little bit more life. And that's a really good tip when you're working with human characters, especially if you find that their skin is looking a little flat and waxy. You probably need to add some pink under or red under the skin tone here to indicate where blood would be showing through, because skin is not perfectly opaque. It is somewhat translucent, and there are certain areas of the body where you can sort of see blood flowing through, and they become a little bit pinker as a result. So that is just a quick tip if you want to add a little bit more life and liveliness to your textures of your character. That is a tip for you. But so this is the final result here, and today is a very exciting day because we are going to rig this character up for animation. Now, rigging, for those of you who are unfamiliar, is the process of basically adding a skeletal structure underneath this mesh so that we can pose it and animate it. And now creating custom rigs is sort of a discipline in and of itself. So it's a little bit outside the scope of this course, but again, if you are enjoying this character creation portion, I do recommend you go and take some dedicated character creation classes. But for this course, we are going to be using Mixamo to rig our model automatically and apply some basic animations to it. Now, Mixamo is a web-based application. It's provided by Adobe, but it is totally free. So go ahead and open your browser and navigate to mixamo.com. You will have to log in or create an account if you do not have one already, but as I said again, it's totally free to use. So once you are logged in, you will be met with a page that looks somewhat like this. This sort of preview render right here may be blank for you at first, but basically what we have here is our preview window right here, and right now we just have sort of a generic Y bot in it, meaning a male mannequin. And this page over here has the library, the Mixamo library available to you. So the first tab of the library is characters. So these are all pre-made Mixamo characters that you can use for free. You know, just click on any of these to load them up. They have some, you know, cartoonish things, they have some more realistic looking things, but the cool thing about these characters is that they all share the same skeleton. So basically, if I tab over here to the animations tab, we have a library of animations that we can use with any of the characters here. So regardless of what character is being shown in the thumbnail, because they all share the same skeleton, they could all be animated the same way. So by clicking any of these, we can play a preview of that animation on this mesh. So the way the animation for games works is essentially the mesh is just a wrapper around the skeleton, and it is the skeleton that we actually move and pose to create our animations. So as long as all of your characters share the same skeleton, which if you rig them using Mixamo's auto rigger, they will, you can, you know, you can share the animations, you can create one animation asset and share it across any and all of your characters. So that is really cool. So I just have like a little knight character in here and just showing you some of the previews of the animations we can do. But The really cool thing about Mixamo is that we can upload our own characters. Mixamo will auto rig them, and then we can use any of these animations on them. So I'm just going to click the whatever animation you have playing or previewing on this character is going to be shown right here on the right hand side. So to get rid of the animation, to return to the bind pose, we can just click X here. Now you can see for all of these characters here, if I click on any of them, they are all modeled in that T pose that we also modeled our character in. And the reason that we modeled our character in T-pose specifically is so we could use the Mixamo auto rigger. So as long as you have your character set up like this and it has basically a humanoid form, we can use Mixamo to rig it automatically and save us a lot of time. So let's look at how we go about doing that. So let's return to Blender, and to upload our character into Mixamo, we need to export it to a file type that Mixamo can read. So if you are unsure of the file types, you can just hit this upload character button here, and they are all listed for you right here. It can read an FBX or an OBJ or a zip thereof. There's also some more information if you'd like to click on these things how to prepare your model a little bit more in depth, but I'm just going to show you what I know as far as getting this up and running in Mixamo. So we need to convert our character file to an FBX. Now we talked a little bit about how to export to FBX formats before when we brought in some of our things into Unreal. So this is essentially going to be the same. It's just going to have the extra step of going through this auto rigger before we bring it into Unreal so we can animate it. So I was doing a couple tests of this, and I have found that because I created my textures at a 4K resolution, they are too large to be uploaded to this web-based service here. So the first thing that I really need to do is to remove my materials from this character before I upload it. Now this isn't going to delete my material, it's not going to delete the textures I have saved to my hard drive, it's just going to remove it from this model to reduce the file size a little bit. So the downside of this is that when I preview my animations in Mixamo, it will be on this blank white. We will not have the textures on the character. But that's not going to affect our end result because we're going to apply the textures back to the character in Unreal anyway. We're going to do that after we have our animations. So once you have removed your material from your character, make sure that the low poly version is selected in the viewport, and that is the only thing that is selected. You may notice here that I've also joined my eyes to my character here. All I did for that was select the eyes in the object mode, then select the character, and then press J on my keyboard. In fact, I can show you, I can separate them again and show you again how I did it. So the first thing you need to do is make sure your mirror modifier for your eyes is applied to your eye mesh, otherwise you will lose one of your eyes. Once that is applied, go ahead and click on the eyes, shift click on the character, and press Ctrl and J on your keyboard to join them together. And you know, if you're worried about your material, you can always reapply it. It's still saved in Blender locally, and it looks just fine. Everything is joined up correctly. Okay, so I'm going to remove this one more time and select my whole character in my viewport and come up to File, Export, FBX. And here's my little test file here. I'm just going to overwrite this one, but for you, name it whatever you like. I'm just naming it character final, so I know that this is the final version that I'm going to be rigging up in Mixamo. So make sure that selected objects is checked right here to limit your selection so that you don't accidentally export your high poly. And everything else can remain the same. All this armature and bake stuff, we don't have any animations, we don't have an armature yet, so we can just leave that all as it is. So go ahead and hit export. And once that is complete, we are going to come into Mixamo here. And right here, you can select your character file from the browser, or you can drag and drop it if you have your file browser open. So Here is my file right here, my FBX file, so I can just drag and drop it in. It'll take a couple minutes to upload it, and to make sure that it can be rigged. I was having some issues with file size before, so if your file size is too large, again, removing the materials was the single most helpful thing for file size, but you can also come in and reduce the geometry on your model a little bit. Okay, so this is the first page of the auto rigger. As you can see, we have our character uploaded here. He looks great. No textures, obviously, because of the file limitations, but this is right. So basically all this page is asking you is your model facing the correct way? And if it is facing you and it is oriented, you know, with its feet on the floor, then this is correct. The default Blender export settings for FBX should have you facing it this way, but if it's not, you can always, you know, rotate them around to be facing you. Once that is done, you can hit next. Now we need to place our markers. So we have all these markers here, and there's a little guide right here to show you how they should be placed. And this is just going to help the auto rigger place the bones properly. So we just need to grab the chin and lock it to the chin, the wrists on the wrists, elbows roughly on the elbows, knees right there, and then the groin right there. And that is all we really need to do to set up for the auto rigger. So we're going to use symmetry because we have a symmetrical model here, and we're going to use their standard skeleton. There's some other options here, but we're just going to use the standard one. So once that's done, we're going to hit next, and the auto rigger will start its algorithm. It can take several minutes, so be patient, and we will come back when it is rigged. Okay, so this is the result of the rig. It took maybe a minute for me, may take longer for you, depending on your PC and the complexity of your character and all that. So this is just sort of their default test animation to make sure that it was rigged correctly. So what you want to do at this stage is just kind of zoom in and take a look and make sure that everything is moving correctly and you don't have any weird glitching or errors. The hands tend to be the part that have the most issues, but this looks okay to me. I find that even though we're using a standard skeleton, Mixamo is really good at interpreting. If you have, like, I only have 4 fingers on this character, but it's still really good at interpreting the hand rigs there. So I think this looks pretty good. So I think we can go ahead and move forward. Let's hit next. And now we have our character up, albeit without a material, in the Mixamo rigger. So if we wanted to preview any animations on this character, we can come over here in animations and pick any of these, and our character would play with that animation. Now, depending on what animation you're previewing, there are some options here, like if your arms are clipping into the body, you might want to adjust your character arm space, and then there's, depending on the animation, different styles of settings and things. So like sometimes some of them have styles, so if it'll be more low key, and then if we up it, it'll be more vigorous. Let's get a walk animation on this just to see. There we go. There's more of a neutral walk. So we can do things like have it lock it to be in place so we can view the animation loop. And we can trim it. So if we wanted just a portion of this animation, we can trim it here, and the trim will dynamically show you the updated trim. Obviously for this one, you would want it 0 to 100 to get the full loop, so there's no glitching. But if there's like just a portion of an animation you want, you know, that's a good way to do it. Arm space will help with the, you know, if you have your arms sort of clipping into your body naturally, you can up the arm space a little bit or lower it if need be. And overdrive has to do with sort of the speed of the animation, so we can slow it way down, or we can speed it way up. I think it's at 50 by default. So this is how we get our character rigged and animated. So what I want to do now with regards to the project is I'm not going to use any of these animations just yet. I want to just get my statically posed character, but with the bone information applied to it. So I'm just going to hit X on this animation to get back to my T-pose here, and even though this is static, we have the rig information all ready to go, as we saw through our animations. So all we need to do here is to download the character again. Because we have no animations, we don't have to worry about any of the strange animation settings here. We just want to download it into the FBX format, and we want to download it as the T-pose. So let's go ahead and hit download. And that will give you a new download right here in your box. I'm just going to move this over to the folder that I had it located in before. Sorry, I'm just doing this off of my other monitor. Okay, so I've just dropped my download into this folder. It's just called Character Final 1 because I already have a Character Final. I'm going to rename this, just going to hit F2. And I'm going to name it Character Rigged, just so I know which one it is. Okay, so once we have that, we can bring this straight into Unreal if we wish. So let's go ahead and open our project files. I'm just going to open it straight from the browser, which you can do by double-clicking the U project. And let's give this Unreal a second to load this up. Okay, so here is our game file. It's been a little bit of time since we've seen it, but I mean, we can jump in and play and everything is still the same just as we left it. So let's work on bringing our character mesh into Unreal now. So what I'm going to do is come into my mesh folder, and over here I have all static meshes. So what we're going to import now is called a skeletal mesh, which just means a mesh that has been rigged with bones. So we're just going to hit import, and I'm going to bring up my character rigged.fbx, and I'm just going to click open. We're going to get these FBX import options here. Now we have to pay a little bit closer attention to these for a skeletal mesh. So you'll see that Unreal has detected that there is a skeleton attached to this mesh, and we have this new option right here for choosing a skeleton. So if we shared a skeleton with the mannequin here, we would select this. However, this is a new Mixamo skeleton, so we're just going to leave this at none. And what that will do is it will make sure that it will generate a skeleton asset for us. So we also want to make sure skeletal mesh is enabled, which by default it should be if your character is properly rigged. We want to import the mesh. Everything else, I believe we can leave at default. The only thing I want to do is just make sure that we're not going to create a material because I want to manually import these. I find it's just less error prone if I do it myself. Let's leave everything at default essentially and just hit import and see our result. Ignore that. Okay, if we double click on this pink asset here, this is our actual mesh asset, which will show us our character. Now we don't have any materials applied to it, so it's just giving us this default gray, but everything looks pretty much the way it should as far as the mesh goes here. Now there's lots of details here on the skeletal mesh, most of which we're not going to get too far into because it's just a little bit outside the scope of this course. But I just want to show you that this is what the skeletal mesh editor looks like here. So this icon up here refers to us being in the mesh preview. So we're looking at anything that has to do with the mesh. If we want to look at just the skeleton that Mixamo generated for us, well, I mean, it's not just the skeleton because it's sort of an invisible asset under the mesh, but we can look at the hierarchy of all of our bones here. So if we come into the skeleton view and come into the skeleton tree tab, here are all the bones that were generated by the Mixamo rig. So in theory, if I am to move any of these around, I can pose this character just by selecting the bone and rotating it around a little bit. So I'm not going to mess with that too much, but I just wanted to show you that this is the skeleton it generated for us with all the bones, and this is how it is parented. And we're going to come back and look at this in a little bit more detail in a future video when we talk about retargeting our animation assets. But for the time being, for the rest of this video, let's just worry about getting this character properly set up before we do that. So really all I need to do here is to add in the textures. Oh, it's also created this physics asset, which has to do with sort of like ragdoll physics. If your character dies and you want to just have it sort of ragdoll, this is what this physics asset is for. We need this for all of our characters, all of our skeletons, but we're not going to mess with it in this course. So just leave it there and leave it as saved. So I'm going to bring in my textures now. I'm just going to hop over into my textures folder, import, and I'm going to bring in all these textures I created for my character. And we're not actually using quite the same setup that we did for these ones. So we're going to create a new master material. So let's come into our materials folder. Let's come into material here. And let's just call this m_character, or mm for master material, or something of that nature. And so this is going to be pretty straightforward. I'm just going to drag and drop these textures in, essentially. So we have our base color, connect it to base color. We have our normal map, which we want to connect to our normal. We have our ambient occlusion, connect to ambient occlusion. And we have our roughness, and we're going to connect that one to roughness. And that is essentially it. So the reason that we can't make an instance of this and use this same object materials, that we didn't have a roughness map for these ones. We just used sort of an AO map. And there are sort of complicated ways in which you can add more variables and switches and things to materials, but that's just a little bit out of the scope of this course. This is more of a basics and a general overview course, so we're just going to make a new material. So make sure you save it out once you have completed it. And let's preview this on our character to make sure everything looks okay. So I'm just going to open up my skeletal mesh asset here. And down here under my asset details, I have my material slots. So let's find our material and reduce the size of this so I can actually see it, and let's just drop it in. And give it a second to load it. It may take a minute. So the only issue I'm seeing here is that it's obviously much too shiny. This has to do with some texture import settings for our roughness map, I think specifically. Let's come into our textures here. Let's open our roughness, and let's change our compression settings to masks. And it may just require us to, we may get an error here because the sampler type is set to color by default. Just change it to match whatever you set it to and save. And I believe this will do the trick. So yeah, so now we have our proper roughness information in here. So if you ever see like shiny plasticky textures, it has to do with these compression settings here. And it's usually trying to use a non-color map as a color map. So this is basically the same thing as in Blender when we change these color space to non-color. That's essentially what we're doing. We just have to set that in Unreal. Unreal's really good at detecting what kind of maps you're bringing in, especially for like normal maps. You can see it's already changed the compression settings away from default, but for sometimes with some of these grayscale maps, you'll have to change it yourself. So I'm just gonna make sure everything is saved. We can get rid of these windows here, and essentially our character is ready to set up. Make sure everything is saved out in here, and you can always hit save all here. So at this point, I could, once that finishes, I could come in here, I could drop this character straight into the world and view him how he looks in the world. It looks pretty good. But we still cannot use this as our playable character because we have no information on how to transfer the animations that come with the default Unreal mannequin, we need to sort of set up a transfer for those animation and those bones informations, because if you look at our mannequin mannequins. Okay, so we use this one. If we look at the skeleton tree, the names and all the parenting here is very different than the ones that we have been using, or that we generated for this one. So in the next video, we're going to look at how to transfer some of this information so that we can use the animations that come in Unreal, the running and the jumping and all that, on this character. So that will be in the next video.